Hello and welcome to day number 5 of our 12 days of Christmas here on Georgie's Stripping the Dipping. I'm your host, F1 Black, and let's forget about yesterday's silliness. I think it was all a big misunderstanding. We celebrated our 4 guest hosts from the season. So I figured what better way to try and track down Denz than bring back one of my favourite lives that he did this season with none other than Taylor Ferns, the first woman in USAC Silver Crown history to record a podium. In fact, she got 2 third places in the 2022 season, and I won't spoil what she got up to in the 2023 season. So here's the sultry Caribbean voice of AMG Denz, the modern day Morgan Freeman, hosting Taylor Ferns in our first live of the season.
Before we get into that, Taylor, let's get into the first question. So, what are your New Year's resolutions? And a bird tells me, in the form of F1 Black, it was your 27th birthday celebrations in December too. So, did you get up to much at all for your birthday? And what was your mindset coming into this new year?
Yeah, so to start off with my 27th birthday in December, I normally growing up, I've always celebrated my birthdays, luckily enough, in Indianapolis, Indiana, because it's always the PRI show, which anyone within motorsports in the automotive community, everyone goes to Indy for that second weekend in December. So was fortunate enough to spend some time with some of my motorsports friends there. But on my actual birthday, I had a final. So I had a law school final. So I spent it studying for trusts and estates. And that's how I spent my 27th. But on top of that, as far as like the holidays and coming into the new year, I was just thinking about this morning, and for me, my philosophy really is I'm always kind of like an ever evolving. I mean, all of us as individuals are ever evolving, right? But I always feel like I'm always trying to improve like every day as far as like self reflection. So I'm not the type of person to really have New Year's resolutions because I'm just always trying to better myself. But I always feel like though at the end of the year and as I've kind of gone through adulthood like more and more, I'm like I always feel like maybe it's just maturity, but by the time I get to the end of the year, I'm like, man, I am exhausted. So then after the holiday season, I guess now it's just like new energy, reinvigorated, and just ready to kind of keep going and building on a lot of the progress that I made on and off the track, not only just in 2022, but in the years prior, because I kind of go by like the building blocks of life. Like we're all just like continually building to get to like our purpose, our ultimate successes. So really, I guess that's kind of the resolution for me. It's just to keep progressing. I had started working at the Sam Bernstein law firm right after I graduated with my bachelor's degree. So it was my first real job essentially. And I first started off there as an intern. And a week later, I was promoted to the operations director. Now, what a huge jump from just being an intern to then running the entire office, right? And I did that for like 4.5 years, the directorial role. And I worked closely alongside the CEO and the president and the COO and became close with all of them. And I wasn't even really racing at that time. Like I said, I had taken some time off from racing. And then I'd gotten to the point to where I was just going to start racing a little bit. Like my dad had bought one of my old race cars back and he's like, oh, we're just going to do this for fun. Like it'll be a fun family thing. And I don't think they really expected me to take back to it and be as competitive as I was and like right off the bat. And so, especially with the marketing, like the intensive like competition within marketing as far as like personal injury firms go in the United States, I was like, you know what? I feel like this would be such a great opportunity. Like this is my job, so I don't want it to be a conflict of interest or like intrude on like my salary or my bonuses or whatnot. Like I put a lot of thought into it, but I asked the Bernsteins if they were wanting to just come on board for a little bit on like to help out with my racing. And they did, and we shot some commercial spots, and it kind of like tumbleweeded into this really big deal. And I mean, it's a great story too. Like I'm their employee, they sponsor me. I go off and I'm kind of like almost like this racing star, short track racing star in a way. And people are like, where's the intersection here? But I think that all comes back to like if I didn't work there and if I didn't work as hard as I did, like I really busted I bust my butt for them. And I think of them as like my family. And so I think really that just paid off in hindsight. And then aside from that, like I also started doing some things like you were saying before, like when you follow your passions and pursue your passions, like things and ways just kind of happen for you. And so I think the Bernstein sponsoring me is just kind of like reciprocal of that. But then also like to bring more attention to my sponsors and myself and like my off track efforts. I was like, okay, what's a great way of like how I could use like my legal degree and like mix it with my motorsports degree aside from like my law firm sponsoring me. So now I write a monthly column now for Sprint and Midget magazine and Speed Sport, which is big in the US. And so I was like, I mean, I write a lot for law school. I write a lot for my work, like why don't I do that and kind of combine that with my motorsports career as well. So and I feel like really if you see like my off track product, I feel like it's just almost as successful as my on track product because I just feel like when you follow your passions, like things just happen. So I'm really grateful for that and really grateful like, for the Bernsteins and a lot of my other partners that have come on board like Mobile One. So excited to see where 2023 takes me.
How do you manage, work life, obviously study life or educational life, and your private life as well, with family, friends, and stuff like this too?
Yeah, I think like for me, the main thing is just like mastering overlapping everything in ways. Because I do kind of like joke around and say like I should join the circus one day with like all the like juggling that I'm doing with all the stuff that I'm involved in voluntarily. But yeah, just like I kind of live like this flexible lifestyle in ways like it's flexible but it's not because I definitely have to stay organized. Like I live by the calendar in my phone, and definitely stay organized and then like try to stay on top of my schedule that way. But at the same point in time, like my remote, like which my job is one of my sponsors, the Sam Bernstein law firm. We now ever since COVID, we've been working remotely. And so that gives me great flexibility as in like, if I need to be right now, I'm in Florida we're Michigan based. So I'm in Florida right now working. I work throughout the day today. And then like tomorrow I fly back home to go to Indiana. So like I'll be able to clock in when I get to Indianapolis and work from there. But from the other standpoint, as far as my law school, I have to be in person for that. So as far as like I kind of like travel, like my travel schedule is super crazy because a lot of times I have to go back and forth between places so I can make it to and from class because I have to be in Detroit, Michigan for class. And so that definitely makes me like I have to plan ahead of time. So I'm like, okay, if I can only miss 5 classes a semester for just one of my classes, like, okay, I need to pick and choose like where can I be then, and like kind of even leave one class as a buffer. Like there is no sick days. Like there is no sick days. And so just kind of learning how to overlap things. Like right before I hopped on the call here, I was working this morning and I just like told the legal team that I work for, okay, I have a hard stop at this time because I had to get on a call. And so I think it's being flexible with my time, but also just like letting people know that, I mean, I like to think I'm Superwoman, but we all have our days. And so I think it's really just being upfront with people. And if I can't do something, like I wish I could do everything that people ask me to do, but sometimes like I'm only one person, right? We're all human. So can't push the limits too hard.
Like, what is the path between Silver Crown and IndyCar? Is there a straight kind of path between the two, or would you see yourself doing Indy Lights? Is it in between? How would that work, to answer that question?
So right now it's kind of if I was to go from like so if I wanted to go on a Silver Crown to IndyCar path, I would have to run some Indy Lights races. Um Also specifically because I know IndyCar, at least specific to the Indy 500, you have to race at least 2 Indy Lights races before starting the Indy 500 unless the ACUS board approves you. So that's kind of like a caveat in there. I'm pretty sure unless they change the rules, this is what I was reading on last summer. So yeah, typically like the stepping ladder from Silver Crown to IndyCar would be doing, or now it's Indy NXT, Indy Next.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that would kind of be the stepping stone. And also, if I was to go straight into IndyCar now is so circuit court, like it used to be evenly split between ovals and road courses, and now it's more leaning towards more road courses. And actually, the Indy Light schedule or the Indy Next schedule is like even like 85% road courses. So definitely, if I was to go the IndyCar route, would definitely have to do probably a season of Indy Lights.
That'll be interesting. And again, like, where I think, like you mentioned earlier as well, we're going to see Jamie Chadwick in that kind of like field as well. So it'll be interesting to see how she'll come across the likes of Miles Rowe and other kind of drivers in that kind of series too. And
Mhm.
Mary asked earlier, I think we kind of answered it, but I'll let you have the flow with it, any Taylor. It's just like, like what do you enjoy more in terms of racing? Because she mentioned W Series, which we talked about before she actually got here, to be fair. But like which one would you say you prefer more in terms of like open wheel kind of like aero cars, or more kind of like NASCAR kind of more stock cars? Is there one kind of racing you lean more towards than the other? And would you want to compete in W Series if it were to ever come around again?
So my generalized answer is I just love racing. I'm a fan of racing. So I will race whatever I can get in.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, I am leaning towards open wheel racing. Like racing in general, there's so many variables that go into it, but I just feel like coming from an open wheel background, again, I didn't do that much late model stock car racing. But just from like what I initially experienced, like I love racing my sprint cars. I love my USAC Silver Crown cars, and to me, like open wheel racing has my heart. As far as like considering if I would race the W series, I have actually considered it.
Mhm.
Actually the directors at USEC had actually kind of like submitted my information because they were kind of like advocating that I race a W series as like a representative of USAC. And it ended up coming out that they were kind of looking, I hate to say this, but they basically said I was too old.
No.
And they didn't directly come back to me and say that. I don't wanna say they didn't
Okay.
directly come to me and say that, but they were I didn't even get a response, but I think that they were looking for, like, more teenager age as far as like almost like a grooming type of field.
Okay.
So I was just because there were females my age that were initially competing in it. I don't want to be taken out of context. Do not take me out of context. But just from like what I heard, I think that they were trying to start like to get into the younger age brackets. And so yeah, that was also like before like this last season. And so yeah, I just never heard a response basically. So I have considered it.
Hmm. Well, I don't know. Me and Black gonna have to send them some fiery emails after this, Taylor. Sorry, I'm joking. We won't do that. We won't
No,
quite.
don't say do not take me out of context. I said basically I was getting the ball
But actually, to lighten the mood on that one, Taylor, like, let's talk about a dream kind of hot lap experience then, because you're talking about, like, from a general point of view, you'd race anything, and actually open wheel's been your life. But let's just say, like, money's no object and no barriers. It's just literally you can have the keys to anything you want around any circuit in the world. Which car and which track would you pick?
Hmm. So initially my instinct says an IndyCar at IMS.
Ooh.
Or I don't know, like I feel like saying testing an F1 car somewhere. Like maybe like the streets of Monaco, but I don't know if that's I mean, obviously that's a bucket list
Yeah.
place I feel like for anybody. I mean definitely an F1 car, but at what track? I'm not sure. I would just say Monaco, just because I just feel like it's a bucket list destination. But my instinct says the IndyCar at IMS first.
Ooh, I think they're both great options there, Taylor.
Yeah.
But then to kind of caveat, then you mentioned Monaco, but how about Belle Isle at Detroit? Because that to me was a really physical circuit in the sim. So many bumps, so many undulations,
Yeah,
walls that are literally like right next to you, like riding a bicycle in the living room.
yeah.
Like, are there any particular circuits on last year's IndyCar kind of roster that, really spoke to you, or ones that you've always dreamed of racing on as well, like the Laguna Secas or some of the street circuits or the ovals as well?
Yeah, so I mean Belle Isle, like that's basically that's near my hometown basically. And I was actually at the IndyCar race this or last summer. So that would definitely be cool just because of like the town effect and because there's so much history to that. But now they're going back to the streets of Detroit, which that will still be really cool because I feel like that's where they are like what they initially used to do.
Mhm.
And then they went to Belle Isle and they're coming back, or I don't know if they started at Belle Isle and they just kind of hopped around. But as far as like circuit courses, as like the streets of St. Pete, I feel like is legendary from like the IndyCar perspective. It would be cool. I've been to the Circuit of the Americas before. I've never tested anything there though, so I think it would be cool to take some laps around there in a car, and whether it's IndyCar, Indy, NXT, Formula One, that would be cool.
Hey?
Um, but yeah, I haven't really dove into kind of like the road course list very much. I know I did test a Formula 2000 car at Sebring once before, and that was cool. So yeah, that's a really great question.
Well, we love coming up with them here at
Yeah,
Stripping the Dipping.
that was thought
Taylor.
provoking.
Thank you very much for listening to the 12 Days of Christmas here on Georgie's Stripping the Dipping podcast. I've been your unusual co-host F1 Blag. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and give us a follow both on Twitter and on Instagram at Strip the Dip. Until next time, bye.